I will now introduce Mr. Lloyd Williams, who will do the introduction of our police commissioner.
Good evening, everyone. I've been asked by Reverend Sharpton and Michael Hardy to do the introductions. It's easy to do. First, for those who I don't know, my name is Lloyd Williams, and I'm proud to serve as president and CEO of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, also as chairman of Harlem Week. I want to introduce my senior associate who is with us, Winston Majette, if you would stand, who is the executive director of our chamber. My brother, Willie Walker, who leads us in many of our initiatives, and our boss, the Honorable Jackie Rowe Adams, head of Harlem Mothers Save and a board member of Harlem Week. Let me share with you why this is important for me to do this. First, in our communities, there are certain professions that are sacred. First and foremost is our teachers. And without our teachers, we would not have a community. And then when we look around and we start talking about those who represent the clergy, we then start talking about those who represent the civic sector, the civil rights sector, those who represent the business sector. One of the key components of our community is our law enforcement partners. Without them, you don't have a community. And there are many people who are talking about defunding the police. I want to share with you, I really support defunding the police. But let me be very clear on what I'm saying. No, we don't have a perfect police force, nor do we have a perfect group of clergy members or a perfect group of doctors or teachers or whatever. But there are things that are not realistic any longer. The police department is being asked to do things that they're not supposed to be asked to do, they're not being paid to do, and it has been dropped on them. And we need to look at that. So if you're saying, let's take out dollars that might be allocated for the police department that can deal with the mental illness in our community, then I'm for that. If you are talking about dollars that supposedly goes to the police community to deal with the homeless, then I'm for that, as long as they're dollars that are going to the police department to deal with those areas. But if they're not dollars that are going to the police department, then I want to ask us all, this is our community. When someone is standing in the middle of 125th Street without much clothing on and with a machete in their hand, and they clearly have mental illnesses, who we calling? Are we calling the social services person to deal with them? Or are we calling the police? And if the police walks past them and don't do anything, then we are correctly going to challenge the police about taking care of that. So there are too many things. As they've driven everyone out of the mental institutions where they need to be, they can get proper health and care, etc., they put them in our streets. Who's responsible for that? It's not NYPD, but NYPD takes the brunt of that. And when we look and listen to people now being pushed into the subway trains and the tracks, who's doing that? These mentally challenged people who are not getting the care they're supposed to get. As we deal with what's happening with the homeless in our community, who's dealing with that? And so when you come into your stoop and there are 2 or 3 homeless persons who are blocking your stoop because they're trying to be safe, they're trying to get some warmth, they're trying to be where it's lit, but you're trying to get past them, who you calling? And so at the end of the day, we all know that our police are not perfect, but I want to make sure that the group that represents our city, no matter where you may be, let's find the perfect group. And so what I'm saying is there are persons like our community affairs officers standing in back. Give them a hand. Give them a hand. They are extraordinary. There are persons like Kathleen O'Reilly, who has commanded Manhattan North and been extraordinary in her outreach and communication with her service area. Is that right, Willie Walker? Is that right, Winston? Jackie, is that right? Has Kathleen O'Reilly been great? Yeah, give them a hand. So I have no problem with us taking on the police, because at times they should be taken on. But I also say, are we also saying thank you to them? And they have problems too, because what the police is doing is they're not creating the community. Too oftentimes their precincts are like forts. And when you walk past the precinct, you don't get the warmth, you don't get the feeling. Sister Sekou, who's here, stand up, please. And what she's doing with our youth in our community. No, you stand up. Give her a hand for what she's doing in our community. Okay? So we gotta break barricades down, but we can see a lot of this insanity coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, pitting us against each other, pitting the blue states versus the red states and the democratic cities versus whatever. That's not setting the right tone. And so what I'm saying to you is the police are here to hear what you have to say. Tell them. And if you don't tell them, then don't say anything later on. You had the opportunity to share. They've come and they've brought the top brass out. Well, that shows they're respecting us. And so it's very easy for me to introduce the commissioner. I call the commissioner, at least once a week, sometimes twice. And Willie, we don't talk about police issues. All I call him to say is, how you doing? Is everything okay? How's your family? And sometimes we're not doing that. We only talk to each other when there's a problem. And therefore, whenever we see each other, we see a problem coming. So we need to learn to say hello. The police need to learn to say hello. And we need to understand that all of us make up this community. So I'm very, very proud to introduce to you my commissioner, one of the most decent public servants that I've seen in this city, and I've been here for a long time. So without further ado, it's my honor to introduce to you the Commissioner of the New York City Police Department, the Honorable Dermot Shea.
Thank you, sir. Well, that was a warm welcome. Good evening, Harlem. And Lloyd, thank you so much. Lloyd speaks the truth. He does call me, and I think there's a lesson there because he's telling the truth. If there's a problem, he'll tell me what the problem is, but generally it's how you doing, and there is a great lesson there. We're here tonight. I'm going to be quick because we're here for a reason tonight. We're here to hear you. We're here to listen primarily. I want to make, for the record, a complaint, though, Lloyd, because if I tried to talk as long as you just did, I'm usually getting thrown off the mic because they're saying, no, we're here to listen. We're here to listen. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. At the end, I'll be up here taking notes on my cell phone, and I'll have a statement at the end. But I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is really important. This is our 7th in a series of listening tours, if you will, and it's the beginning. It's just one part of what we all of us are trying to do. And it's you sitting here tonight, and it's, I'm told, over 400 people at home that are logging in tonight, but it's much more than these initial meetings. It's people that are happy with the police, people that want to say, we love the police, but you're doing this wrong. People that have all wide variety of a diverse field of opinions about what we do. From advocates, from legal aid, from prosecutors, from grassroots organizations, everything. So we want to hear from you all of you, and we look forward to it greatly. And Lloyd, I'm sure it's going to come up today what you talked about, mental illness, because it has come up in every single session that we've done. And it's absolutely, you hit on some of the key points about defunding and shifting resources and what are the police best suited to do. But I think we're going to get into it in the next hour and a half, so I'll leave it to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Lloyd Williams, for that introduction. Thank you. So a little bit about tonight's session. It's going to be about 2 hours in length. There'll be a 90-minute community discussion. For those who are Zoomed in, please use your chat feature to ask questions or post your comments. Facebook Live, please use the comment box to post your questions or comments. And after tonight's session, you'll be able to watch a full video tonight and view all of the materials and resources and complete a survey, please, at nyc.gov/NYPD/reforms. So, why are we here this evening, right? It's exactly like the Commissioner said. We're here to hear you. We want to be able to restore trust and faith in your police department, because we are your police department. The most important role that we have, that you will have this evening, is being an active participant. So please, there are no silly questions, no silly comments. We just ask that everyone respects each other's opinion and their views, and try and keep the questions to about 2 minutes in length. Just a little bit about the New York City Police Department when it comes to community engagement. The police department is ever evolving when it comes to community engagement. If you remember back in 2015 is when we first transitioned to the neighborhood policing model. We now have over 1,000 members in every precinct of New York City committed to that position. Recent reforms, stronger relationships have always played a key role in our precision policing, helping us to focus on the small fraction of individuals in New York City that commit the bulk of crime. And that's why we are forever committed. If you take a look in the past decade, we were able to reduce arrests by 49%, and there were 83% fewer criminal court summonses issued. And that's a result of your help and us focusing on the right people. In 2020, we continue to evolve as an agency to improve our product for the public, starting with my office, Collaborative Policing. Our mission is to find innovative ways to serve our community, improve access to services, enhance community, government, and advocacy relationships, design creative crime reduction strategies, and increase non-enforcement options available to our officers. Also in 2020, under the leadership of Police Commissioner Shea, the NYPD has renewed its commitment to proactively reach young people, to provide constructive engagement strategies connecting them to resources and opportunities in their community. Understanding our communities is critical to serving our communities. So we encourage you to continue this dialogue by having your voice heard at your local community council and build-a-block meetings. To assist us in hearing your voice more clearly, the department has developed a customer service initiative which will be implemented citywide. It is now currently in 2 precincts as a pilot. And what it's designed to do is to make sure that you have an exceptional experience when entering either one of our facilities or interacting with any of our officers. Additionally, as part of this program, we have developed a customer service survey. The survey allowing you to share your experience so we can continue to improve. I have no doubt that with this continued improvement, we will encourage all of the greater minority communities in New York City to pursue a career with the NYPD. I will now turn this discussion over to Assistant Chief Matthew Pontello.
Thank you, Chief Holmes. Good evening, everybody, and thank you again for joining us in this important effort. I would just like to take a few minutes to highlight some of the more significant innovations that the NYPD has undertaken in the last few years. Now, this is not to suggest by any stretch that we think our work is complete. To the contrary, we recognize that there is still a great deal of work to be done. And I think these examples of some of these efforts really illustrate how our goal here is continuous improvement, recognizing that we can always do better. And many of these efforts have been the result of a lot of collaboration with community and other stakeholders. One key area is training, and I cannot overstate the value of training, right? And it's not just for new recruits going into the police academy. It's really a career-long process of professional development. Quite frankly, some of the skills that we teach our officers are perishable. I mean, think about in your own experience. I know this has happened to me a number of times where at one time I knew how to do something or I learned how to do something, and then maybe years later, if I haven't done it in a while, I forget. And then I'm going on YouTube looking for videos on, how do I fix this thing and how do I make it work? So it's no different with police officers. We're all human beings. We suffer from all those same human frailties. So it's very, very important that we support our officers and have a training regimen that continues to teach them new skills, but also refreshes the skills that they need. So, one way we're doing that, we've expanded our commitment to training. When I first came on the job many years ago, we maybe had about 3 days worth of training total a year. Now most police officers this year will go through about 10 days of training. We're also reaching them in new ways. So, smartphones are not unique nowadays. Everybody's gotten one for the most part. We've equipped all of our police officers with smartphones, and that enables us to push information and messages and training to them, department-wide, instantaneously, and put information and training material right in the palm of their hands. To date, we've pushed out over 100,000 hours of training video to police officers in the field, and it's a great way to augment our training. And some of the key courses that we've delivered to our members in the last few years include implicit bias training, de-escalation training, physical tactics, critical decision-making, and crisis intervention training, teaching them how to deal with people in emotional distress. Perhaps the most critical decision a police officer can ever make is that decision to use force. And we know that given the nature of crime fighting and police work, at times it is in fact necessary. However, through our policies, training, and oversight, it's our goal to make that as infrequent as possible. And I think this chart, if you can see it, the blue graph, really exemplifies a critical part of this evolution. In 1972, there were 994 officer-involved shootings in New York City. That was with a much smaller police force in a city of only about 7 million people. Fast forward to 2020, in a city of 8.5 million people with a much larger police department, we've had 32 officer-involved shootings so far this year citywide, and only 18 of those were adversarial encounters between a civilian and a police officer. In 2016, we revised our use of force policy, which now includes comprehensive reporting on use of force and requires the investigation of each use of force incident. And that data on use of force is available on the NYPD website. So I don't think I need to tell anyone here that stop, question, and frisk was a tactic that was at times overused and led to a rather significant erosion of trust between the police and the public in New York City. What we're showing here is that, we've worked very, very hard over the last few years to bring down the number of stops and also at the same time to begin to rebuild trust with the community. We can't have effective public safety and crime fighting without public trust and public and police working together. Interestingly, as stop, question, and frisk declined, so did major felony crime during that same period. There were a lot of folks who thought the two were tied together, that, more stop and frisk meant more crime reduction. It turns out no. So as stops came down, major felony crime also came down, and I think this proves the idea of precision policing that Chief Holmes referred to, right? It's about really just identifying the small number of people who are responsible for most of the crime in the city and focusing on those people, as opposed to focusing on geographical areas where crime is occurring for deployment and enforcement. Discipline, of course, is of great concern to the public. It's also of great concern within the department. I think part of the public concern around discipline and distrust of the disciplinary system within the NYPD is because for years discipline has been shrouded in mystery. And that's a result, or had been a result, of New York state law that prohibited the department from releasing information about discipline to the public. In 2018, we brought in an outside panel of experts to take a look at discipline in the NYPD. And the good news there is that they found that the disciplinary system was generally robust and fair. However, they pointed out that it lacked transparency, and that without transparency, nobody got to see what was happening, and therefore there was no confidence in the system. And even internally, people didn't understand what the system was and how it worked. So now we've been publishing some of our discipline data online. It's on our website about discipline year over year since 2016, what that looks like. And then most recently in June, the state law was revised. So we're now preparing to release more information about discipline and about specific cases in the NYPD. There's litigation going on right now that'll affect some of that, but we expect that to be resolved in the near future. And one way we're doing more outreach in this area is, and this has come from community and advocacy groups for quite some time, asking for a better understanding of the penalties that would be imposed for certain actions or acts of misconduct. So we developed a set of disciplinary guidelines that describe those penalties, as well as the factors that would go into assessing a penalty. We published that back in late August. We received public comment, both online and in the forms of letters sent to us. We're now going through that comment, and we're in the process of revising those guidelines, and we expect to have the revised version published by January. So the public, not only the public, but even people in the NYPD will be able to see what the penalties are and how the system works much more clearly. And of course, transparency really is the common thread that weaves through a lot of this, and I think it's very, very important to building trust. So along those lines, we're in the process of putting much more information out online and making it publicly available. So for several years, we've had a lot of information, online data about use of force and arrests and summonses and crime. However, the data was probably useful for researchers, but probably not good for the general public. It was difficult to download and navigate and use. It was not really presented in a very intuitive and user-friendly format. So in order to remedy that, we're in the process now of building these online dashboards that will make the customer interaction with the website much friendlier and easier and allow you to get much more information about the police department. So currently we have dashboards on crime data. We call it CompStat 2.0. We also have these dashboards on the demographics of the police force, as well as information on hate crimes. And we have other dashboards that will be coming online. Like I said, discipline and use of force will also be out soon. The NYPD, I'm proud to say, has the largest deployment of body-worn cameras in the country. We have over 25,000 police officers and supervisors currently in the field wearing body cameras. Since we began the rollout of this program in mid-2017, more than 13 million interactions between police and public have been recorded, and we're adding about 130,000 new videos each week. And these videos have proven to be very, very valuable for investigations, including the resolution of civilian complaints, and also for review by supervisors. You know, we use the videos internally to have supervisors review videos and assess the performance of their people, and where appropriate, mentor them so that we can develop, you know, the best cadre of police officers we can possibly have. Also, body camera video from critical incidents, including police-involved shootings, is posted up on the NYPD YouTube channel. So we're putting new videos out as incidents occur. We're also going backwards. There was a period of time, so if you're looking for a particular incident and you look on the website, you may see something is missing. There was a period of time where there was a court order that prohibited us from publishing videos, but that court order was lifted early last year, so we're also in the process of going backwards and publishing those videos as well. So if it's not there now, it will be soon, if it occurred in that time period. And of course, you know, if we're going to deliver quality police service to the public, we also need to look internally and listen to and address the needs of our employees. So we're doing that in a number of ways. One way that we're engaging with our employees is we've been conducting very recently a series of forums on race and social justice. So these forums have been very, very frank, candid. They've been emotional. The feedback has been very, very powerful. And it's really, these discussions are giving us a lot of great ideas on how to make the department more inclusive and equitable. And that's an ongoing process that is continuing. We're also supporting the health needs of our employees, right? This is important to make sure that our people are resilient, and also it gives them the ability to address some of the stress and trauma that can come along with being a police officer. And one of the ways we're doing that is through a peer support program. We've trained peer volunteers to be counselors and be available to people to help get them resources they need, you know, if appropriate. So I'll leave it at that. I'll turn it back over to Chief Holmes, and I hope this helps provide some stimulus for questions and conversation. Thank you all very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chief Pontello. So just a couple of things. As the police commissioner said, this is our 7th listening session for the month of October, really. But with that being said, we heard an array of topics, had several discussions, and I think some of the top things that we touched on was diversity in the police department, training, how do we respond to mental person in crisis, mental crisis, in addition to a lot of people concerned about the health and welfare of our police officers. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to our facilitators for the evening, Mr. Wes Moore and Ms. Sheila Wells. Wilson Wells, I apologize.
Good evening. Again, my name is Sheila Wells. I am from Union Settlement, so my disclaimer is that I do not work for NYPD, and Union Settlement is an on-the-ground social service, social justice organization empowering East Harlem for 125 years, and so we are very committed into the conversation this evening. So we thank NYPD for hosting this meeting, but again, I'm here to represent you, the community, you on Facebook, you on Zoom, to hear the questions that you have for NYPD. And so I'll be a conduit this evening. As the questions come in, we will answer them in a timely fashion, and we will nicely and politely cut folks off if we are going a little over, okay? And so, Wes.
Thank you very much. My name is Wes Moore. I am the Chief Executive of Robin Hood. First, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. There is no listening session if people don't come out. There is no process of having a reform and reinvention conversation if people are not coming out tonight, if people are not coming into Facebook and Zoom and making your voices heard. Additionally, just like Sheila, I do not work for the NYPD. I don't work for the city of New York. I don't work for the state of New York. I run a social service and social justice organization. And in addition to being co-facilitator for the night, I'm also one of the co-chairs of this process, the Reform and Reinvention process, along with Jennifer Jones-Austin from the FPWA, and then also Arva Rice from the Urban League. I'll say just one thing very, very briefly, because we want to get into the point of why we're here today, which is a listening session, is it's both a continuation of what the commissioner said earlier, of saying that this is a small part of a much larger process. This is one session of many, but the point that I want to make very briefly to not just all of you here tonight, but the people who came out to the ones before, is that we hear you. Everything that you are saying, the comments, the points, the frustrations, they are justified and they are heard. And tonight will be no different. Also want to say that we're coming to this process as something where the reason we are having this conversation, the reason that we are going through this, is because I know that my job is to make sure that the community is heard through every aspect of this process. Not just from the listening process, but also in the collection of ideas and speaking with activists and public defenders, when it goes to public comment, when it finally gets submitted into City Council and back to fulfill the requirements for the EO, for the governor. Community must be heard in every point of that process. And that is myself, for Jennifer, and for Arva. That's our responsibility. And I know finally that I come to this process knowing that our job really is to just spend the time and to hear and to listen. I'm someone who truthfully is, someone who has family members who have worked for NYPD, and I'm someone who came up in communities that I know for a fact were over-policed, and there was no accountability. And so when we're talking about reform, and when we're talking about actually hearing the community, the point of tonight is making sure that that's actually being heard, both the things that you're experiencing, but then also what recommendations do you have about how we reinvent the process of how community exists how police exist within your communities. And so very, very thankful that you all came out tonight, and just looking forward to the process with Sheila as well.
So let's get started on a transparent conversation. The first question is going to come from Nicholas Baraka, and this person is on Zoom. So if you can unmute.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video on, although my lighting is not that great. My name is Nicholas Becerra. I live in the Uptown community in Harlem. I've lived here for about a decade, and I have mental illness in my family. My sister lives with mental illness, as well as my mother. And I think I had a really kind of not good reaction to the gentleman who was speaking at the beginning of the forum. I think was painting a very stigmatizing picture of what it looks like to live with mental illness in America. 1 in 4 Americans lives with some sort of mental health challenge, and so it's very, very common. My question is about mental health emergencies, something that kind of came up in an earlier conversation. We're currently in a pandemic, and social isolation is exacerbating a lot of people's mental health challenges. And we're seeing that a lot of people are experiencing mental health emergencies, needing critical and urgent access to mental health care. We saw that with, Daniel Prude in Rochester, with Damon Daniels in San Antonio. We just saw, very recently in Philadelphia, George Cepantis in New York City. And so my question is, would the NYPD and the city commit to realigning mental health calls to the Department of Health or the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene so that people living with mental illness or having a mental health emergency could get a care response over law enforcement? There are some really wonderful models based on the Cahoots model out of Eugene, Oregon, a coalition here in New York of which Fountain House, who I work for, is a part, is CCIT NYC Coalition, and they have a project that would send, instead of law enforcement, a peer and an EMT to people experiencing a mental health emergency. And so my question is, would the NYPD and the city commit to implementing a model such as that to ensure that people get the critical care they deserve?
Chief Holmes?
Hi, good evening, and thank you for the question. Yes, we have committed to that, actually, and I know we were looking at a co-response, which is currently on hold as a result of COVID and so many other things. But with that being said, we agree. It's something I agree with. We're not the experts in that area, so the experts should be responding. And if there's a safety matter, then there will be a co-response. So yes, we are very much committed to that and are currently looking into how do we make that work.
The next question is from in person. This question comes from Jake Lehman McGee. What steps will be taken to help current new officers to understand the needs of the community they serve? And it's a two-part question. Second part, how will you encourage and promote meaningful programs for young people? Chief Holmes?
It's your night.
So thank you for the question. As far as engaging youth, I think I stated at the beginning, that was first and foremost with the police commissioner. That was his agenda when he got sworn in, that what can we do to help the youth? And we are committed to that. As a matter of fact, we had some meaningful meetings until, again, we were met with COVID. But I can assure you that's at the top of our list. And it's not just the youth that we interact with. It's all youths in New York City. So we are definitely committed to that. And what was the second part of the question?
Getting people used to the community.
Oh, getting people used to the community, yes. So as many of you may not know, but we finally have an academy class going in November 2nd. And as a result of such, there is going to be a community engagement component. So way back when Commissioner Bratton first became commissioner, I was part of the training in 2014. We have what we call community partners, and some may be here this evening. And that's when we kind of formalized the community partner position. And they would go to the police academy and speak with the recruits, and then when the recruits got out, they would actually, not take them by the hand, but for lack of a better term, show them the neighborhood, introduce them to people. We're now committed to making that a permanent part of our training. Just like we cannot get better without you, we cannot be creative in our crime-fighting strategies, precision policing, quality of life issues without the community we serve. You should be part of the training. So if any of you are interested, I think just speak to Commissioner Chauncey, he's the head of community partnership, or myself, chief of collaboration, and let us know, because we're definitely looking for volunteers to come in and speak to the men and women in Academy about what it is that, what they should know about the communities that they will be serving.
So stay right there, because in the same vein, we have another in-person from Abina Smith, who's asking, in the NYPD strive for collaborative pathways for the New York City police reform and reinventism, are you willing to implement policy of zero tolerance of retaliatory behavior towards community council board members, community partners, and constituents who raise concern on police conduct or have opposing points of view about police community-related issues and incidents?
Great, that already exists. That would be like intimidating a witness, right? That's what I would kind of equate that to. We have zero tolerance for that. So anyone that has concerns should always feel free to come forward and express those concerns.
Thank you.
So I have a Facebook question here, question and a comment, where from Sam Al, who says, it is dangerous for officers to live where they work. oftentimes they are engaged with the criminal elements. The last thing that you want is for them to know the officer's residence and family. So the question is around striking that balance between the fact that, as Sam Al says, that it's dangerous for officers to live with their work, but at the same time, how do you forge that level of connection between officers and the community if the officers don't live in the community?
Anyone? You pick.
I love talking to you all night. So that's quite interesting because many people don't know that officers cannot live currently as the rules and regs in the police department where you're actually assigned, unless you're assigned to housing or transit because it covers such a broad spectrum of the city. But with that being said, how we strike that balance is by pushing community engagement. Like I said earlier, with the neighborhood policing philosophy that we were committed to in 2015, the YCOs, currently we have about 330 officers assigned as YCOs that were in training, and I don't want to sound redundant, but as a result of COVID, they are now currently back in training. And they're specifically going to be assigned to every precinct, and their sole purpose is to address whatever youth issues or concerns we may have in those precincts. So community engagement, community engagement, community engagement, those relationships are important, and that's how we're going to strike that balance.
Thank you. So next one, we're going to go back to Zoom. We have Julie Hypolimzin, if I'm saying your last name correct, if we can unmute Julie.
Okay. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, all right, I'll turn my video on too. Yeah. Hoplamazian is my last name. Nobody can say it. I'm Armenian. I've been a problem since I was a kid. So I'm an Episcopal priest. I'm at St. Michael's on 99th in Amsterdam. And, recently we had the community affairs officers reach out to us and express an interest in getting to know our community through some of the programs that we already have going on at the church. Primarily our tutoring program, but also perhaps our soup kitchen. This was encouraging to us, but, these are vulnerable populations. And one of the things that I had asked about was, is it possible for you to come without uniforms on? Having uniformed and armed police officers at a soup kitchen or a tutoring program, and I say this as someone who also wears a uniform. I mean, people look at a clergy collar and they don't always have positive associations with it. So, I understand how difficult, and I'm not wearing my uniform tonight, but I understand the delicate balance that it is to, how do I function in my capacity? I want people to know what I represent, and I do that by the uniform that I wear. And how do you balance that with the fact that the uniform is such a barrier sometimes? And I felt, I honestly, once I brought that up, they kind of just, they were somewhat dismissive of the proposition, and they did not come. We had a Sunday soup giveaway. They said they would show up, and they didn't. I emailed them a follow-up. They never responded. I was really saddened and disappointed by that, and I felt like, it kind of felt to me like they were only willing to engage the community on their terms. And when I said, look, this is, if you want to bridge the gap, and you want to have people trust you, this is one way I'm suggesting you can help bring those barriers down. So I want to talk about how how much are you really listening? And I know you want to listen and hear us, and I'm telling you that for vulnerable populations, the presence of that uniform alone, not the person inside of it, but the uniform alone can really be a barrier. So can we talk about that in terms of community engagement? Because I know there's a balance between wanting to represent the police department and the uniform itself being a barrier for trust.
Great point.
Yep, thank you for the question. Great question. 99th in Amsterdam. We can absolutely, I'm looking at Kathy here. We can absolutely get in there, and I apologize for whatever did transpire. We can absolutely get over there without uniforms. But as I'm listening to you, you talked about balance, and I'm thinking the exact same thing, because from my seat where I'm hearing you, I would love to be able to somehow strike that balance, because we struggle at times with, we're trying to get people, especially kids, to not be afraid of the uniform. And we could certainly, I commit to you right here, it is not a problem at all to get officers over there in, you know, we would call it soft clothes, no uniform. But that isn't really helping me in terms of getting people to see officers in uniforms in a different light. So maybe we could do both, but we can absolutely get over there with officers. I don't know if there was a breakdown. I don't know if they were told they can't go in uniform. But I apologize for you thinking that it's tone deaf on our part, because most important of all is getting together the communication. So that's what we strive to do and commit to do.
The next question is from Facebook, and this is from Meeks D, and it's actually simply more of a comment, good comment. It's saying that mental health trainings, as was addressed earlier, anti-racism trainings, crisis prevention, intervention training, and cultural competency can all help with the NYPD. And so I know we've spoken a little bit about the mental health training, but maybe there's a way we can talk a little bit about what's being done on those other elements as well, and how, and what are those things that can be talked about and spoken about for those.
Yeah, no, these are all very, very critical areas, and they're areas that we've developed training curriculum on. So we've trained about 17,000 people so far, what we call crisis intervention training, and that's done with NYPD trainers, but also we partner with mental health clinicians to come in. It's a 4-day training program. It's very intensive. It's hands-on. It's going through different scenarios of dealing with somebody in crisis. Unfortunately, we had to suspend that a few months back because of COVID, because it is done in close proximity and it's hands-on, interpersonal, very close training. We're talking to our partners now. We're hoping to get that resume that training with appropriate precautions in place by December, at the earliest, January at the latest, because that's critical. And it gives cops those additional skills to recognize somebody in crisis and also to respond appropriately and identify what resources are needed to bring in. On bias, so it begins in the police academy. We teach what we call policing in a multicultural society to begin to acclimate cops to that. Chief Holmes mentioned community partners. It's a big part of that, bringing in community to make it real and tangible so police officers can see that and begin to experience it, and then have that follow-up when they graduate and come to their precinct. Very, very important that, you know, they meet community people again and get that introduction to the community. It's essential. We also recently completed a program of implicit bias training. So the idea that just the way the human brain functions, we all have these unconscious biases. It may not be about race, it could be about anything, but it's just these preconceived notions that we all have, and it affects how we react when we see something or are exposed to something. So that training program was completed in about 2 years, and the great thing about that was it was customized depending upon your rank. So police officers and detectives got one version of the course, how to recognize it in themselves, and to give them some tools on how to address it and overcome it. Supervisors got a different version. They got those same skills, but they also were taught in their role as a supervisor how to recognize it in others and how to intervene. And then there was an executive level version of that for executives that dealt with, you know, managing a large organization and a lot of people, and then how you recognize that and how you instill those values in your people and how you follow up. So all these things, I think, complement each other. It's something we're committed to. We've just started an implicit bias version course for our civilian employees, and we're looking at what we do next in terms of like an ongoing refresher training. So that's an important part of it as well. With all of these trainings, it's not a one and done. It cannot be. It's essential that we constantly build upon the skills and reinforce them. And I think a big part of that is what Chief Holmes referred to with community partners, that when new cops come out, part of that training continues when they're assigned, and it's with community support.
So just a Facebook comment from Nancy. The comment says, if people don't realize systemic racism exists, change will never happen. And definitely we see that with some of the trainings. So just if you can keep that in mind as you are having your trainings to just touch upon that. The next question is from an in-person, Twilla Duncan. She says, how can we diffuse anger of teens and young adults? Chief Holmes? It says, how can we diffuse anger of teens and young adults? I'm going to add to this question in terms of community policing.
Or de-escalation. Is she referring to de-escalation maybe?
Possibly. She's here.
Yes. Yes, you can. I didn't know you were in the room. How are you?
Miss Duncan.
Good.
Yes, my name is Twyla Duncan.
Hi.
And I have noticed that a lot of older teens and young adults still have, of course, anger and frustration and distrust. And it's one thing to reach out to younger kids and try and build that, but how can you diffuse the feelings that people have and change them now so that we don't lose them?
So I agree with what you're saying. So we reach out to all age groups. Many of you know we have the Explorers. We also have a cadet program where you're going to college and we pay part of your tuition. And then we have a youth council in the community. But we reach out to all age groups, and it's true. You want to dispel those beliefs, right? So with that, constant, I can't express enough about community engagement. Community engagement to me is this. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. Like I walked in and I saw 3 gentlemen, young people sitting over there when I came in, and I just put up the peace sign to them, and they were like, hi, hello. To me, with the softest, the little gentlest acknowledgement of a person, period, whatever age group they're in, especially when we're wearing this uniform and it may be that sense of intimidation, goes a long way. So I always say it's the little things, little by little, but it's still a form of community engagement.
Thank you for the question. We'll go back to Zoom. We have Kat Peeler on Zoom.
There we go. Hi, my name is Kat Peeler, and I've lived in East Harlem around 125th Street and Park Avenue for the past 14 years. And I just wanted to offer recommendations today. I, along with so many other people, were so deeply disturbed by the George Floyd murder. And so in that time frame, I, as just a citizen, had developed some points that I thought were very important in terms of equity, fairness, and justice in policing. So I just wanted to share those today. And I share them not really knowing exactly how the NYPD measures up against these types of comments. So the first one is a ban on excessive force, including knee-on neck restraints and chokeholds. And I know that New York State has now done that. And including like a universal use of body cams and having audits of sample footage, an independent review and investigation of police brutality and racism and civil rights misconduct, because self-policing in those areas is perhaps not the best approach and doesn't always promote the best fairness and justice, and that the results should be binding and not able to be overruled by a police chief. Public transparency, and I know you talked about that, and equitable consequences regarding police brutality, misconduct. Also being able to root out problem officers who exercise undue or excessive force and violate civil rights. And again, with some type of independent review and transparency. And then lastly, that there should be some type of, ultimately, a nationwide police conduct database of officers who are fired for those types of offenses, of brutality and civil rights offenses. And so ultimately that these people would be screened out and seen as unsuitable and not allowed to go into policing or security guard types of positions. So those are just some overall thoughts that I had.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Along those lines, and I'll ask this to anyone on the dais, what could be done by elected officials to change or modify the catch and release flow? And this is from an in-person, I'm sorry, Carmen Vasquez. So if Carmen is in the room, definitely we can bring the mic over to Carmen. Is there a filter to remove officers that constantly use excessive force? And the third part is overhaul the qualified immunity for cops so that, the qualified immunity for cops so that it's easier to sue in civil court. I don't know if Carmen, you want to just give Carmen the mic. She's right here in the front row.
Thank you very much. I am from the 23rd. We also have wonderful community relations officers there, Murphy and Gibbons. I just wanted to mention that. So I've been extracted from El Barrio, right? Yeah. So my first thought was, and I didn't have enough room there to write, my full thoughts, because we have seen a significant increase in crime lately. The catch and release, the CRE system is really not working for the best benefit of the community because we have like a revolving door. They go in and they come out, and the same person doing the same crime 10 times. And what is the cap? How long does that continue to happen before these guys are taken off the street and for our own protection? That was one of my comments. The other comment was about defunding the police. I'm really in favor of that because the way I look at it, if you don't put money into the budget line for salaries at a time when we need more officers on the street, we're not going to be completely safe, okay? So that's not going to work. Use the money for training, like we've been talking about, and as a matter of fact, a lot of my questions were answered by the delivery today. So I'm thinking, give more strength to the police inside, make the workplace a little more comfortable for themselves because it's not really a good job for them every day coming out there thinking that, am I going to come home to my family tonight? Give them protection, give them the camera, and use the money to do the material equipment that they need and make them more secure. They're secure and they will secure us. That's the way I look at that. And as far as the changing the law for the unions are very strong. I understand that, but if we can do something to change that, change that a little bit so that the qualified immunity for cops, so that there is like a deterrent for the bad cops. It's unfortunate because only a small percentage of policemen have put this veil for the rest of them, and that is very unfortunate. So the ones that are bad, is there a filter to take them out of the system by action and process, okay? Put them on a back office somewhere. Don't put them on the street because they use their power in a very forceful way that gives the good cops a bad reputation.
I agree. So Sheila and Wes, I'm going to just make little observations, and then Kathy, I'll turn it to. A lot of different points were brought up. And tying it into the last caller had some ideas about what she thought should be put in place. And I'm listening to them, and I'm saying, check, check, check. In some way, shape, or form, we touch a lot of those already, Matt, right? And Matt answered a question a minute ago about how do you indoctrinate officers so they're familiar and comfortable in the community. And we do a lot of that too. But Wes, we're sitting here, and we're sitting here for a reason. So we can have the laws and the policies and the practices and have a lot of it ingrained already, and we can have all the training in the world, but we are human beings too, and we still need to reinforce it. We still need to have people in executive positions making sure that people are held accountable to those policies and trainings. I think that's good and bad. I think it's a little more good than bad from my view, but you could have a different opinion that we're on that road. We hear a lot of these things, and we're on that path to having those things checked off. But we're still here for a reason. And we're here for a reason because we're not always perfect in executing a lot of this. The catch and the release is an interesting one. I think we go down a hole on that. Ultimately, this is your city. This is my city. This is our city together as citizens, as me, and we are your police department. We have a role. Elected officials have a role. I think the current climate, by anyone's definition, is a little off kilter. It was not long ago that we were driving crime down in every category and driving incarceration down to greatly reduced levels. If you look on New York City websites, they said last year, New York City is the lowest incarcerated major city in the country. That was before the bail reform law was passed. And that was passed for good reason, because there was injustices that needed to be corrected. But with anything that you do, and there's other factors too. So it's all of our job to examine where we are now and what needs to be recalibrated. That's as politely as I would say that. Kathy, you want to touch on a piece of it?
Good evening. I'm going to touch on the easy part of your question, speaking about morale and boosting morale for the cops in the precincts. I take that very important role as a borough commander to make sure that we take care of our cops. And just as you want to have morale in your homes, you want to make sure we have a clean station house for our officers to operate in, where we listen to them, where their voices are heard. And as a precinct commander, as a borough commander, I hold my precinct commanders responsible for the morale in their precincts. And I've heard that question come up at some of the other borough forums. So some of the things that we do to boost morale in the precincts: keep the station house clean, make sure that we maybe have better gym equipment for the officers, just like at home, precinct barbecues. That's something that helps build morale. And the third portion is we have an ability to reward those good cops with Commander's Days, so they have an extra day possibly to spend with their loved ones. So there's a lot of good things we can do in boosting morale, and I know that question has come up, like I said, at several of these forums. But I can tell you quite honestly, standing here after being 6 years leading Manhattan North, morale is good in Manhattan North, and I'll tell you why it's good. Because we've had, for the 6 years I've been here, 99% support of the people that work and reside in the borough. So you play a huge role in the morale of Manhattan North. And I can quite frankly say morale is good in Manhattan North. Thank you for that.
Just on the last piece, I'm sorry, with discipline and qualified immunity, because I don't want to skip the question, because I'm sitting. No one's a bigger supporter than the police than me. I love my cops all over this city, but we have to be honest too. Right? We have, same thing as training. We have policies, we have procedures. People need to have faith that the system holds people accountable. That is, and we had a panel commissioned, Mary Jo White was in charge of it a couple of years ago, and basically came back and said the NYPD discipline system is robust and it holds people accountable, overwhelmed for the most part. But you do a lousy job of telling people, and they don't understand what you do. So that's on me. I think we've taken significant steps recently to put more and more information out. We're not perfect by any stretch, but believe me, I understand and I believe that when cops do something wrong, I'm not universally firing them. Depends what they did. If they need to be fired, they're going to be fired. If they need to be retrained, they're going to be retrained. If they need a little metaphorical slap, then they're going to get slapped. But people have to understand that there is nothing more important than building trust. How do you improve morale? Having a workforce that's appreciated in the community. You're not going to be appreciated in the community if the community doesn't trust you. So this is just everything here is related. And you have to have a system that holds cops accountable. And when we continue to make improvements in those areas, I think you're going to see really good things happen.
I have a question here, and this is actually, and maybe probably for you, Chief O'Reilly, for Barry Weinberg, who is saying West Harlem has seen a significant improvement in community police relations with the introduction of the Neighborhood Coordinating Officers Program at the 2-6 several years ago, as mental health, substance abuse, and homeless outreach services are more important. How can precincts work more closely with the Department of Services, Department of Health, and others? And how has that worked so far?
So I'm not going to say we're out of the homeless outreach business. We're not. We do work with Department of Homeless Services. We do work with the Department of Health. We do respond to 911 related to mental health and homeless situations. So we are continually working, and we're working together with the other city agencies on a continuous basis to improve those quality of life concerns, especially in East Harlem.
So I've lumped the next couple of questions together because it's kind of the same kind of common thread, and this is a Facebook read only. It says, has the NYPD implemented any kind of sessions for officers to discuss their fear while on tour? I ask this because a lot of officers react in certain ways out of fear of what they may potentially face. They already fear confrontation, so they may react. And this is from Mo Bartz from Facebook.
No, thank you for that question. Yeah, great question. The health and well-being of our police officers and our civilian employees, we have 55,000 employees of paramount importance. I think I mentioned earlier that, we cannot begin to hope to serve the public if we're not looking internally, making sure that our people are well cared for. So, yeah, a number of things, initiatives that we have. So we've expanded the work of our employee assistance unit. We have a group of people, that's all they do is deal with employee issues. Help them if they have some personal needs, some personal crisis. We've also been working with the health insurance companies to make sure that we have adequate health insurance and that our people know how to navigate the system. One of the unique challenges, and somebody I think was mentioned early on about mental health and the stigma associated with mental health. Last year in the NYPD, we experienced 10 suicides, which is extraordinarily high. Law enforcement generally is higher than the general public. Last year was just extraordinary. So we did a lot of outreach internally using our chaplains and our psychologists who work for the department. We visited every command. We did a lot of outreach. We made sure that people were aware of the services that were available. But the biggest challenge certainly is the stigma associated with mental health issues. That exists even in the police department, especially in the police department. Any culture where strength and resolve is valued, it's even tougher to talk about these things. So, through the development of a peer support program, through the expanded outreach of our employee assistance units and our chaplains, through the cooperation with, we set up a service through New York Presbyterian to get mental health services, but also working with the health insurance providers to make sure that those resources were available. That because of the stigma, people don't necessarily come forward and talk about it. So if they don't know how to access services, if they don't know who to call, or if they call the health insurance company and they can't get an appointment for 6 months, they generally don't do anything. They don't complain because either they don't know who to complain to, or they're afraid to complain because they don't want to reveal that they're seeking some mental health service. So, we began a concerted effort last year through training and outreach and through these other programs to try to break down those barriers. We brought in the chief medical officer from the American Foundation for the Prevention of Suicide to talk to our people and develop training videos. And a big part of those training videos included testimonials from people who had experienced some personal crisis or mental health issue. And they described the process they went through and their evolution and how they got the right help and that got them back on track and helped them. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're supporting our people, we're helping them deal with the stress of policing, that if they need help, they get help, because we want to get them back and make sure that they're productive and valuable employees.
Thank you. Mobars Alexander from Harlem wants to know, is there any truth to the claims or speculation about Academy intelligence tests weeding out the smartest applicants? Is there any truth to that? And along the same kind of lines, this is from in person, Clint Warzak. He said, given that police, and this person is in person, so if you can raise your hand if you want to expand upon it, given that police officers cannot live in neighborhoods they serve, how long on average are officers assigned to a precinct/neighborhood? Trust takes a long time to build, and a lot of turnover erodes trust. What policies exist in the NYPD which work against building trust by limiting the time in neighborhoods?
There's no time limited for police officers assigned in precincts. You're right, they tend to move. I think you see it both ways. You see sometimes officers that spend their entire career in a precinct, but then you also see officers that every 3 to 5 years. The good thing about the NYPD is it's so large and vast, and you think of all the different assignments, and people like to take advantage of those different assignments and career opportunities. Where we get more complaints is with the precinct commanders. They absolutely, people just get to know them, they love them, and then they move on, and I'm sure Kathy hears that complaint all the time. But I'll tell you a story from Brooklyn. About a month ago, I was invited to a dinner, and the community threw the community affairs officer a dinner because he was in that community almost 30 years, and he knew everyone. So it just shows that there is, believe me, there is strong bonds that develop between members of the NYPD and the community. We have problems, but there's also great stories, and I told this story yesterday too. I was in the Bronx at NYCHA a couple days ago with Monique, who's the Tenant Association chair head, and she told me I broke the curfew, and she was laughing. And you can't arrest me, but I broke the curfew back in May because I had to make sure that the officer that I love was safe, so I went to the precinct. So there's good and bad, but I think that the question is right. Sometimes we do move around for a variety of different reasons.
We're going to go to Zoom. Martin Wallace.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Okay, great. Good evening, and thank you for hosting this event. This is a question that I ask quite frequently at the community meetings that the 26th precinct hosts, and I'll ask it of you. One of the ways that I get around for my work and also with my family is by bike. And I also am concerned about when I'm walking around with my family, how many cyclists are not obeying the rules of the road. And one of the reasons I think that this may be happening is there just aren't that many police officers on bikes who are really experiencing life at that from behind the handlebars, if you will, instead of the windshield perspective. And I'm wondering, I've asked it over and over, and the response I often get is, we don't have the budget to have police officers, to have a real robust fleet of police officers on cyclists, on bikes. And I find it difficult to believe, especially because cruisers cost so much more money. And this is a quality of life issue. I know I'm sort of sidetracking away from some of the other quality of life issues that people are bringing up that maybe seem more significant. But when I go to the park and I see a couple of officers parked in an SUV with the windows rolled up, like in Riverside Park, I'm wondering how it is that they're able to interact with the community that way, and wouldn't it be better if they were either on their bikes or walking in order to be engaged with the community in that way?
So I'm glad you called on me for this, because you've probably seen me on a bike, because I ride my bike around Manhattan North a lot. Manhattan North, we do have a bike patrol unit consisting of 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 16 officers. Primarily, they are assigned to Central Park. It's the largest park. Sometimes they do go to Riverside. And they have been assigned to the 2-6 when need be, due to violence or shootings or events that have transpired in Morningside and St. Nicholas Park. The precinct itself, I don't know if they have officers trained on using bikes, but we do have bikes. But they also have dedicated traffic safety officers that should be making sure that they are looking out and taking the necessary enforcement to address your concerns. But I'm a big person who's in favor of riding bikes. I don't like seeing officers sitting in RMPs. Sometimes it's necessary, though. The 2-6 precinct is one of our lowest staffed precincts in Manhattan North. So for them to be more mobile, it's probably necessary for them to be out in the radio patrol cars.
The next question is also someone from Zoom. And the question is, we heard that one officer was disciplined for yelling Trump 2020 over car speakers. What about the other officers on the scene? Did they report the incident? If not, why were they not disciplined too? We need to see you break the blue wall of silence.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I mean, that was brought to my attention Saturday or Sunday. I'm losing track of the days. Almost immediately, discipline was meted out. The officer involved was suspended. The caller is correct. There was not discipline to the other officers that were at the scene. I did consider it. I thought that was appropriate in that one. So I'd stand behind that one. And I thought it was important to, right away, the officer was suspended without pay. I got some people that said that was good. Some people said that was too harsh. I would do the exact same thing again. I thought there had to be a clear message, and I could care less what anyone's political beliefs are, but that has to stay at home. And that's a clear message that I would think that everyone in uniform understands. He made a mistake, and he's paying the price for it.
So we have an array of Zoom callers that have questions, and I just want to preface again that although we are COVID-friendly in here, we have hundreds of residents on Zoom that have questions. So I'm going to call on a couple Zoom. So I'm going to call on Allegra Legrande and the next Shirley Annan. So if Allegra can unmute herself.
Sure. Hi. Hi, my name is Allegra Legrand, and I appreciate the fact that you are convening this listening session tonight, but I wonder why you do not convene listening sessions at every single police precinct council community meeting every single month. That is supposed to be the purpose of these meetings, and it has been very frustrating for communities not to have this particular forum during the entirety of COVID.
Hi, good evening. That's concerning to me because precincts have council meetings every single month. And one thing that we do notice is it seems to be the same attendees all the time, so we're trying to encourage people to come out more and participate in the community council meetings as well as the build-a-block meetings. But those forums are in place for the very mere reason that you just mentioned. So it's quite concerning to me that that's not happening. And quite frankly, it should be. We are re-envisioning our community meetings, though. We know that there's a lot of people, just like now, COVID has caused us to think differently. A lot of people are using team meets in corporations or Zoom conferences. So that's another thing we are re-envisioning. How do we reach the community that may not choose to participate in an actual council meeting or build-a-block meeting? But that's something we're looking at now, but what's currently in place are these monthly meetings. So I suggest that you actually reach out, and maybe you have to your commanding officer regarding that, because it should be something that's being done. It's what precinct are you in, may I ask? I'm sorry? Community Board 12?
Hi there. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, hi. I am in the 34th precinct, and I have been on the precinct council for some time now, and I've been begging my precinct to please put us in a remote format for some time, because it's not just COVID that keeps people from participating, but it's the fact that there are parents who have to take care of their kids and find childcare to attend these meetings. There are caregivers of the elderly who have to find someone to watch those folks so they can attend the precinct council meetings. And the fact that the 34th precinct is very large and not everyone is physically able to attend every meeting that spreads such a wide zone. So I would like to see us have the remote format to maximize the number of people in the community who are allowed to participate every single month.
Thank you for the question. So I agree with you, and I've said that for a couple of years, and the great thing about being the police commissioner, I can actually do it now. I think we talked about this, right, Juanita? So earlier this year, I was sworn in December. I want to say in January, we started to do remote community council meetings, streaming them. I think we started in Manhattan South to kind of work out some of the kinks. If you go to the first precinct Twitter back in the beginning of the year, I think you'll see that at least I know we did it in the first. I hope we put it out. And we did start to do that. Some of the issues that we encountered is some of the people did not feel comfortable in saying things that they may say in private in a small room around people, but they didn't want, for example, if they're complaining about drugs or their neighbors or things of that nature, to be out there. So there are some logistical concerns, but we are absolutely we have to go down that road. So it will happen. COVID obviously put it to the back burner this year, but Juanita said it perfectly. We generally have the same people that come to all these meetings. And we have no kids, just as we have in here. Nobody under the age of 18, right? Or so there's a lot of areas that we have to continue to improve on, but you have my commitment that we absolutely will find a way to do that.
Thank you. Shirley Annan from Zoom.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to NYPD for listening and taking questions from the community. My question is really kind of circles back to sort of the earlier part of the conversation. There was some commentary about the department's policy towards community engagement and even some discussion about trainings that have taken place, but there seems to be some disconnect between what the department is terming community engagement and what the community is asking for when we are using the term community engagement. And so my question / suggestion is that perhaps one of the building blocks moving forward can be working together to define these terms so that we're all saying the same thing when we're having these conversations.
Can I ask what we're missing, what we're not doing?
If you can just elaborate on what the NYPD is not doing? What we're missing? Shirley?
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting myself again. Yeah, so I guess I'm not necessarily pointing fingers and suggesting that something isn't being done, but I think that what the community is asking for when we're talking about community engagement, within the chat, even here on Zoom, you'll hear or you'll see comments relating to cultural competency training. You'll see comments about the way that officers show up when they show up to community events, the frequency, which types of events they'll show up to, which organizations receive sort of in-person support. So when we're saying community engagement, NYPD may genuinely feel we are extending ourselves, we are engaging with the community, but the community still feels like members of the community, I should say, still feel like there is something missing, there's a gap. And so it could be as simple as defining what we mean when we say community engagement. If there's an understanding on either side what that term refers to, then we kind of know if and where the gaps are and how to properly address those.
Yes, thank you for your comment.
I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you for your comment, and thank you for letting us know that. But we are so reliant on you just telling us what it is that you need and meeting those needs. So whatever it is that we're missing, please just be very forward and let us know what it is. And we are definitely in the business of customer service and would accommodate you. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you. And the next question is actually from someone here. Is Kim Duncan, who's a business owner in the Upper West Side, and would like to make both a comment and a question on behalf of small business owners.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'm terrible at public speaking, so forgive me if I am nervous. I know. And that's what I want to say is I'm a new business owner on Broadway 96th, but I'm representing a lot of Broadway and 90s stores because I've gone around to speak to them. One thing I want to say is the 24th Precinct has been amazing in helping our businesses, and I wanted to bring it up to not only the NYPD, who's been fantastic in supporting my store with problems and other stores, but I wanted to also speak to the first gentleman who spoke. You brought it up perfectly. Right now we're suffering a lot from severe mentally ill people who are aggressive panhandlers, people coming up to stores, standing in front, frightening customers. And what I want to commend the NYPD, number one, because we feel you are the only ones helping us. And I know someone's here from the mayor's office. I want to say we talk to our elected officials. We feel let down by our elected officials. I'm letting you know that a lot of us feel that the NYPD does everything they can to help us, but there's so much that's out of your hands. And I do hope that any budget that's cut from the NYPD goes to the proper services and it is enforced, because we are seeing money that supposedly is going to social services that you can ask a homeless person who's mentally ill with 15 bags and aggressively yelling on 96th Street, was threatening to kill someone and taken to a hospital, and now he's back. I want to say that my business has suffered. I put so much energy and effort and money into our business, and so has everyone else, that we're tired of being let down by our elected officials, our mayor, and only the NYPD has come to help. And like you said, just because you're not in charge of the homeless anymore for certain things, our 24th Precinct has come and always tried to help us, move people along, protect us. And I speak to customers also. They come in and discuss things with me that they get approached by aggressive panhandlers, and when they try to walk away, I myself have been sworn out, I've been frightened, and so have my customers. So we have a problem on the Upper West Side, very much so, but I am going to state, so anyone who, if you can please bring this to our elected officials, it's the NYPD that is helping us, nobody else right now. And that's how we feel, and we are thankful to you and the 24th Precinct especially for all they have done for the businesses. And without businesses, I think we all know, because I'll be honest, as a business owner, and after putting everything we have into it, we're tired that we want to leave. And if we leave, we're going to have more vacant stores than we already do now. It's not the landlords, it's the problems of quality of life. But that's not the right word anymore. It's excessive, it's abusive, and everybody comes to the police council meetings every month, and unfortunately, they're told, and rightly so, we can only do this. We can't make them move. There are a lot of things that are not in your control because of our officials. And that is how a lot of businesses feel. And thank you, NYPD, and thank you, 24th Precinct. Thank you.
So we'll go to Zoom. We're joined by our Manhattan Borough President, Gil Brewer. So, Gil, if you would like to unmute your mic, 2 minutes.
Okay. Yep, I'm unmuted, and thank you very much. And I want to thank Chief O'Reilly, and I certainly want to pick up on the Kim Duncan's call, because I agree. And my first question, which I had put in the chat, was just that, because there's no way, as great as the 2-4 precinct is, and I know it well, that they can answer these questions. And we have got to figure out, as Barry Weinberg from Board 9 said earlier, what is the DHS, sanitation, state oasis, PD, DOH, DEP, HPD, clergy, H&H, SPS, DA, and I probably forgot some of the initials, of working on this quality life, homeless, mentally ill. We have to figure out, like, every single week, day, 24 hours, how are we going to address it? That's question number one. It cannot be just NYPD. Number two, barricades. I know you're tired of me talking about this, but I just want to get an update on the status of those precincts that have barricades. I agree with the precincts being more updated. It's not just the visual and Zoom, which has been happening in some of the precincts. They're the most, I love the people. I love the precinct commanders. I love the precinct council leaders, but they're the most boring meetings in the world. I'm going to be honest with you. So we have to figure out something that has a different format, something to think about, music, a video, something. And then finally, the vendors. This is a hard topic. It's hard on the precinct. It's hard on the officers. Are you going to deal with the wonderful brick and mortar, or are you going to deal with the vendors? Again, we've got to have a much more multi-agency discussion about these issues. So those are my 4 questions. And thank you.
Thank you, Borough President. So a couple topics there on the barriers. We've gotten a lot of complaints on the barriers. We've had protests in New York City, as everyone in this room knows, since May. We're in a much better place, I would think, and still all anxiously awaiting the election Tuesday. But I'll tell you that every day, even though we're in a much better place, we've had about 10 protests a day every day since May in New York City. It may not be in your neighborhood, but it's happening. It's primarily in Brooklyn and Manhattan. As recently as last night, we had groups marching, breaking windows, setting fire to things, and saying that they're going to go to the precinct and burn it down. That's the reality of what we're balancing here. If there are barriers up, and there are barriers literally on the block of every precinct in New York City, probably, but they should be not restricting vehicular traffic, and they shouldn't be restricting pedestrian traffic. They're set up still there, and if they need to be put into place quick, they are. If that's not the case, then you just let the precinct or the borough commanders know, and we'll correct it. So that's on that. On the homeless, I couldn't agree more. Juanita or Kathy said we're still helping. We are still helping, because we are not going to let New Yorkers down. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's the same answer for the peddlers. We were notified we're out of the peddler business 2 months ago. Maybe it's 3 or 4 months ago. And then the complaints came in, and the complaints came in, and the complaints kept coming in that peddlers are killing businesses, quality of life for people that are trying to walk down blocks. And finally I said, enough is enough. We're dealing with it. And we put some officers, Fausto Picciotto and I had a conversation, and we took care of some peddler conditions. But the plan is the NYPD is out of the peddler business. And that's the plan going forward. And I'll say another controversial thing, because I'm never short of controversial things. Defund the police, Lloyd, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. There is no shortage of people saying, here's my handout, I'll take the money that the NYPD has. Somebody better make sure that the people that is getting that money actually does what they're supposed to do, because the NYPD takes care of business.
So we have a couple more. We'll do 2 more Zooms, and I'll pass it back over to Wes. Richard Robbins and then Alice Frontier from Zoom. If you can unmute your mics. Richard first, and then Alice.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for doing this. It's so great to have the opportunity for the police force to hear from the community, and I'd love to see this happen more often. So thank you. I want to ask a completely different question that hasn't been addressed yet tonight, and often is a complete afterthought, which is the issue of traffic enforcement. There are almost as many traffic fatalities as there are murders in New York City, yet too often when I hear police talk, it's just not a topic that's raised. And my belief is we have extraordinary people on the precincts. And I know I sit on the Transportation Committee of Community Board 7, and I work really closely with the 2-0 and the 2-4, and they're great people. But my belief is that the precincts are not well equipped to handle both other forms of law enforcement and traffic enforcement. And I would love to see a completely separate division of the police that takes over responsibility for traffic enforcement. Number one, there's not great data analysis at the precinct level, nor do they have access to data. Number two, the breakup of precincts makes sense for community policing. It doesn't necessarily make sense for traffic enforcement. Number three, officers, when they're on call, will get called away from traffic enforcement to handle other calls. And so even on a day-to-day basis, it's treated as an afterthought. So, and I could go on, but I just want to get your thoughts about whether it might make sense to separate traffic enforcement and have it as a separate division dealing exclusively with street safety. And thank you again.
Can you repeat the last point of that, just the last point? Not the separating I got right before that.
The last point I think was that when officers are on call, they might be doing traffic enforcement only when they have nothing else going on. So if they're sitting, and another issue is that most officers in the precincts are not trained to use radar.
That's right.
Which is a basic tool for traffic enforcement.
Yeah, that's right.
So what I've seen is just overall the precincts mean really well, but they're just not well equipped to
Sir,
handle,
can I ask what
traffic
part
safety.
of what
and
part
yet
of the
another
city?
issue is that a lot of the crashes are people from either outside the community, outside Manhattan, or even outside of New York City. I saw a recent analysis from the 20th precinct that almost all the crashes were not people in the community. So the whole idea of community policing doesn't really work for traffic enforcement because it's not enforcing people who are in the community.
Great. Yes. Thank you for voicing your concerns. Regarding traffic safety, I'll try to be brief. There's a lot to say. Vision Zero, I would say, has been very successful under the mayor the last couple of years since 2014. It's really provided a focus on traffic safety throughout New York City and helped to drive down a lot of the numbers in a positive direction. We do actually have a traffic safety division that is separate and distinct in a citywide unit. We do have a pretty robust analytical component in the NYPD that looks at crashes, pedestrians, getting injured, vehicles, where they're happening, and we try to direct our resources to have the best type of enforcement that will reduce those. So if it's speed at a particular intersection, then we're not going to write, for example, a different type of summons 3 blocks away. I think the best course of action here would be to maybe, Issa, if we could connect and get back to him with a point of contact, and we'd be happy to give you like a presentation on the type of work we do with traffic safety across the city, and if you have ideas that would help, that's great. Every police officer should be involved in traffic safety and are to a degree, but you're right, we tend to focus on specialization, a couple cops that's their sole job, and then outside units that really supplement that. And I would just say with the radar, you're right, but in this day and age, we're kind of moving away from that to a degree when you look at speed cameras, when you look at, automation is picking up the slack there. But on highways and things of that nature, you're right.
So I have a comment from Zoom that I wanted to share, but before I do that, I actually want to bring it to the young lady in the back, and thank you for being here tonight, and just want to hear your comment as well.
Peace and blessings, family. My name is Aisha Sekou, and I'm the CEO and founder of Street Corner Resources. We are a cure violence site here in Harlem. Our job is to reduce gun violence, but also our bigger job is to create peace in the community. And so I just would be remiss if I didn't say that I brought 5 young people to the door. And they were told that they couldn't come in. And I count 11, I think, empty chairs. And so oftentimes when we talk about engagement, if we're talking about real engagement and where the real problem is with policing, it's not with the elders in our community and the police. I know the nights that I've been called throughout the onset of this pandemic was to help the police to respond to young people who were very angry in the middle of the night. And so if we're talking about creating better engagement, we can't turn young people away and they look through that door and see all of these empty seats and there's not 50 people in the room.
Well, I agree.
So
I agree.
I just want to finish. Because
I'm allow you to.
Yeah, because I have, okay. I think that when we talk about engagement, we have to, one, level the playing field. Level the playing field. That's the first thing. Even the feeling in this room does not feel like a level playing field. And I'm going to be honest, I don't go along to just get along, and I don't think that we should. I think that we have to stop putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. There's a real problem with policing in our community. I know because I talked to the commanders that have been in the 32nd precinct, which is in my precinct area where I work and I live for 40 years. For 40 years, I raised a whole child here. So I know what it's like here. I'm very familiar with all of the other precincts. The problem is we do this, and it's, I'll allow you to speak. Why can't I just speak? So we have to remove this authoritative kind of thing. You can't come in. You only have to write it on paper. If we're going to do real engagement, which is what we do in my organization, and I'm not even saying we're the best. What I do is each time tweak it. What could we have done better? What are the guys on 143rd Street saying when you approach them? How are they responding? You know that, Josh, right? We talk about this all the time. So it's not like we got a pass that nobody else has. We created the engagement that makes it so we could walk through a tough block and create relationships. You all could do the same, but some things have to be removed. We have to level the playing field. The other thing is we should never, ever turn young people away. If you have to say, well, why don't you wait outside, and when one person leaves, we'll let another person in. There's always a way to solve a problem. I never like to see young people that it took me to encourage them to sit amongst the police. They don't want to come in here, but I encourage them that if you want change, you have to be in the room willing to make change. And then they get to the door and get turned around. I am upset about that. So for the record, I'm very upset. It is horrible to have a room full of older people and young people get turned away at something where you ask them to come and have voice with you, and there's no place for their voice. So the other thing, moving forward, I want to talk about collaborative policing. Collaborative policing is not where the police decide that they're going to govern people in the place where they live in a way like they don't have freedoms and throw water on barbecue grills, talk to people like they don't count, talk to mothers and elders, and I see young officers do this. I had a young officer talk to my mother, and I was ready to get the switch and whip his behind because he was younger than my grandson looked like. My grandson's 23. He looked to be about the same age. So there has to be a level of respect that comes from the top down, because what I notice in certain precincts, when the commander changes, the culture of the policing changes drastically. I've been in the 32nd precinct. I watched the commanders come and go. They all knew me. I made sure they did. They knew my daughter growing up. But when I started seeing the commanders change and the policing was the kind as if we are living in South Africa. Not everybody here is a criminal. And if you really look, the people who practice criminal behavior, it's a smaller number than it is a larger number. And so the way of looking at the community that is being policed, or the community policing and collaborative policing, there has to be a way where organizations and churches and mosques and synagogues, no matter what the religion, no matter what the practice, whether it's the 5% nation, that they become a viable part of the community where policing is concerned. Because I see them all as viable. I know when there's a shooting, I can pick up the phone and call any one of them. And we don't have to believe or practice or even like each other. And I think that we have to stop with the policing, that you all decide who you don't like because of this kind of voice, that will have the courage enough to say what needs to be said, even when it's uncomfortable, because this is not comfortable for me. You understand? But we can't keep smoothing it over, and then we have a feel-good moment. You understand? And we've had plenty of those feel-good moments. But then it returns to the same thing. In the dark of the night, I get the phone call. An officer is banging a kid's head on the ground. Or a kid is saying, inviting the officer to his private parts because he don't respect them. Both are wrong, but if we had better policing and a better way of being, whether the lights are on or off, and stop these one-shot deals or these feel-good moments, and have some continuum to get through the storm and the difficult thing in the community that divides us, if we can get through that and just be real with that and hear the real problems and not mute people,
so I think we hear you.
That we would have better community. So
I
I hope
think
that
we
you
hear
do.
you.
I hope that you do.
Thank you.
So can I comment to that? All right, I just want to speak for a moment. So I'm going to say I agree with you. The only thing I'm a little confused with is you have Chief Holmes, Chief O'Reilly, and the police commissioner here. So anyone that came to that door that couldn't get in, immediately you could have notified one of us. You shouldn't have to. I want to finish. Right. you shouldn't have to, because I can assure you when we started these listening sessions, the main thing that I spoke about and the police commissioner spoke about, young people in the room, right? That I'm not saying it is, but even the police commissioner commented while we were sitting here when other people were speaking, we're the young people. So I can assure you something went very wrong here. I don't know what the message was to the precinct commanders or the borough, but something went very, very left here, because it should be a lot more young people. That's the community that we need to reach. When I tell you I agree with you, I agree with you. It's heartfelt, right? That's the community we're trying to reach. You're going to get that.
So we hear your point,
And
but
you're going to get
the
that.
hour is getting late, and I want
Yes.
to just keep moving. I know we have a comment on Facebook, and certainly we want to get youth voice and level the playing field, and that will be notated throughout the night. So thank you so much for your comments.
But I have a question. Is it a young person here that came with you that wants to make a comment? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. You too.
Thank you. I want to read a comment from Rose Martins, which came over Facebook, and it says, "The police do not need to do more. They need to be entirely abolished. Any statement saying the police need to do anything is validating the genocide they are enacting on black and brown bodies. The first police were slave patrols, and the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery did so except as a punishment for crime directly following the black codes were created, vaguely criminalizing vagrancy or any disorderly people as a way to make criminals out of newly freed slaves and return them back to their status as second-class citizenry. Thus, slaves became criminals, and slave plantations became criminal, and slave plantations became prisons. This criminalization of black people also occurred in the media, which has made blackness out to be the antithesis of order in the public eye. The anti-blackness is not a deep, dark secret of America. It is and always has been celebrated openly as an essential element of patriotism. By sensationalizing the invention of crime as an exception of freedom and black people as inherently criminal, the state succeeded in re-enslaving black Americans. President Richard Nixon's war on drugs, which increased the police force massively, was intentionally created to criminalize black Americans. The FBI has murdered prominent black social leaders throughout history, like Fred Hampton. You cannot reform the KKK. You cannot reform the Slave Patrol, which is what the police are. Reform is loyalty to white supremacy. You ask for suggestions on what the police should do. Abolish themselves. Quit your jobs. Allow community to take over, because community is more powerful than we could ever imagine." Again, that's a comment from Rose Martins on Facebook.
Thank you for sharing those comments. We're going to move on to Mr. Rose in the essence of time. He's been waiting a very long time on Zoom. So, Mr. Rose, if you could unmute your mic.
Am I now unmuted? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that we've missed a major issue tonight that really is the core of all these challenges. And I know Gail Brewer has brought this up in some of her conferences. It's bullying. Police should not bully, and people in the community should not be bullied. Students should be able to study and read books, and we should have nerds in all communities. Books are more powerful than guns in the long run, and education and promoting education will stop many of these problems. And that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Alice from Zoom. Alice Frontier from Zoom.
Yes, thank you. So the question that I had posed is to the commissioner regarding surveillance. You know, I've been living in East Harlem for decades at this point and working in Harlem, and we know full well that our communities are under constant surveillance. We see the bright lights shining on our buildings. We see the constant police presence, but we also know that there are digital surveillance. And what I would like to know, Commissioner, is if you're willing to be transparent about the forms of surveillance that you're using, when they're used and how you're using them. Specifically, I would like to know if you will let people know when they are identified through facial recognition technologies. I'd also like to know if you will be transparent about who is in the databases, for example, the gang database, and whether you will commit to providing a process for people to challenge their inclusion in those databases.
Well, thank you for the questions. I heard surveillance on the first part. I heard facial recognition, and then I heard, to finish it off, the gang database, which is what we refer to as the criminal group database. Regarding surveillance on East Harlem, I'm not really sure what you're referring to. So, you know, if you forwarded your contact information, perhaps more information. I don't know if you're mistaken. I don't know if you're right. And it's something that I couldn't tell you about. I just don't know at this point in time, so I apologize. Regarding facial recognition, we utilize facial recognition technology. We use it to solve a number of crimes. It is very effective, but we also are transparent about it. And we publish, posted on our website, our policy, exactly how we use it. And we think that's a fair, but we're open to further discussions regarding it. And very similar regarding the criminal group database. Many years ago, I testified at the City Council for quite a lengthy period of time about why I think I was either in charge of crime strategies or chief of detectives at the time, but why I felt it was necessary that we keep track of gang members in New York City. There are many gang members in New York City, but we also have to balance, and heard the concerns of the City Council about labeling people as gang members and then having a negative impact on their lives. So we heard those concerns as well. The end result of that was we have a policy in place that we think is fair, but it is posted again. And if you'd like to see that, you can go to the NYPD website, and this information for transparency purposes is posted. There's a way, it tells you how rules that people, for example, we would consider somebody a gang member, but also that there's an off-ramp for them to come out of the system. So if I'm mistaken about that, I apologize, but I believe all that data is on our website.
I have another question here from Abina Smith, and this is in person. But the question is, would the NYPD be willing to bring back retired police officers, including those who reach the age of retirement, as consultants who can impart to other officers of all ranks their special skills and tactical know-how? That's from Abina Smith.
That sounds like a retired police officer asking that. You know, we're losing police officers at a very fast rate this year. It's very concerning. I've said that publicly. We're down about 2,600, actually more than that, officers, which is why it's so great that we're putting an academy class in next week of 900. The biggest thing that we're losing is experience, and you can't just replace that overnight. There's no plans to do what the caller just said. It's you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was thinking of, for instance, an officer that once worked at the 3-2 precinct, Lieutenant O'Neill. He did an amazing job tactically in this community. So I was thinking of him, for example. I think that he is someone, and of course that's if that person would want to do that, that could impart so much to other officers of varying ranks. That would just be amazing. And the manner in which I saw him do his work, I'm born and raised in this community, the manner in which I saw him do his work was phenomenal. In terms of nuisance abatements and different things like that, without incident. I didn't see, I never saw an incident of anyone being shot or anything like that. It was just flawless, perfect, down to the point where the city lawyers even came at some point, put papers on wherever, if it was a store or whatever was going on. Every time I saw him, it was like the cavalry was arriving. So that's
that's who I was thinking of when
No.
I wrote that question.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Did he retire because he had to, because of his age, or he
Yeah.
just hit retirement age?
No, it was because, actually, he retired once, and he was able to come back, and then he reached the age of retirement. So then he retired officially. But I was just thinking, someone such as him, people like that, their wealth of knowledge. I remember before he retired, I can't remember the name of the officer that was under his, like, mentorship. But then that officer went to someplace else because people want to branch out in NYPD.
Yeah.
So that was lost. That was lost from the precinct when that officer left. So that's what I was just thinking of.
I think we all appreciate that, and the experience, the knowledge, and losing that, like, is difficult to overcome. We could certainly look at those things. I don't know if there's obstacles. There may be in terms of if he's retired and collecting a pension, and then, there's laws to prevent that. But we could certainly look to explore it in any way, shape, or form. But I thank you for your question.
I just want to touch on that once. I know I've gotten the same question, and I do know retired officers that are willing to come back voluntarily and share their experience, which may be something we look at as a community partner component in the police academy.
It's such a great loss when something like that happens.
So believe it or not, we are coming down to the final question. So we're going to take one last caller from Zoom. Penny?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thank you for making time for my question. My question is around what NYPD puts out on social media. I was thinking specifically of the NYPD News Twitter feed, but there may be other social media feeds that are comparable. There are photos of people suspected of committing crimes that are shared, which is, I'm sure, really helpful in catching people who are actually committing crimes. I'm wondering if the racial breakdown of people in the photos presented on social media matches the racial breakdown of people who've actually committed crimes, or if any thought has gone into this.
I'll start at the end. Has anyone ever had conversations about or thought gone into it? Absolutely. Do I have data in terms of how it matches up? I do not. I think it's probably representative, but I don't want to say definitively in terms of any hard data on, for example, what crimes are committed, what crimes are posted. I think crimes are posted on social media. It's a great tool. It's done for a variety of reasons. What cases are open versus all the others, which ones come up in the community and the community is asking for. But beyond that, I don't have any hard data. And you're right, it is a really invaluable tool to connect to the community, and we get countless tips that way.
Thank you. We definitely want to thank our Zoom and Facebook and live participants. I just want to leave the community with a thought, because they're open to comments and feedback, right? The survey at the end, if you have additional things that we heard some common threads about training and racism and implicit bias and all those things. Harlem is a large saturated night jet sentiment, and that's one thing we did not talk about is the PSAs, and so just something to put on our radars for going forward. But definitely want to thank everyone for a wonderful conversation, and I know Chief Holmes is committed to some of the work and continuing to listen of ways in which they can collaborate with the community. And so I'll pass it to Wes for some final thoughts, and then definitely back to the Commissioner.
Thank you so much, and everybody, thank you so much. We still have a whole queue of comments that we just did not have a chance to get to, but want to be clear that just because the comment might not have been heard tonight does not mean it's not going to be heard. This is, as we talked about before, this is the very early stages of a much larger process that will include both community conversations, but then also will include direct outreach, will include public comment, will include a whole collection of different things, that the only way this process can be legit and legitimized is if it's a process that is done with and by and for the community, period. And so your engagement tonight, your engagement in the days prior, your engagement tomorrow, your engagement next week, your engagement next month is going to matter. And it's going to be heard and it will be incorporated. So again, if we did not get to you tonight, understand your comments, your ideas, your advice, your counsel, your thoughts, all these things are things that are being seen and heard and will be incorporated as we are continuing with this process. So again, thank you so much for tonight, and thank you to everybody for being able to make the time tonight.
You're probably sick of hearing from me at this point, but I'll just finish up. Sheila, Wes, thank you so much for helping us out, to everyone working the controls and everyone else in the room, and most importantly for everyone that took time out, and from home, from helping kids, from businesses, and everyone at home. Wes is right. I heard the numbers before I came in that I think there was over 400, is that right? So a large number of people online tonight. We heard a lot of different topics, certainly recurring themes that are coming up in this one. Just a couple that I'll touch on. The woman, I wish she hadn't left and brought up the issue about the kids. We'll find out, what happened. Sorry that they weren't allowed in, because that's exactly who we want in this room. And I wasn't exactly sure of the level setting issue, but I agree with her comments, really. We have to have those hard conversations. Otherwise, we're kidding ourselves, right? She told some stories, and I've heard some of those stories in the past. And, when you look around, we've all been around the block and run precincts. And Kathy's in charge of Manhattan North. Juanita used to run Queens North. And, there's a lot of experience as I look all around the room here. We know there's a lot of good, but we're not naive, and we know we can do better, and there's a lot of bad too. And we know that those stories are true. There's a lot of good going on. I mean, I was at a basketball tournament Saturday in Brooklyn, and the cop that was helping the kids was then taking them to do kind of mentorship where he's teaching them resume building skills. Like, there's tons of stories like that. But we also know that we have to do a heck of a lot more. To the woman that's sitting here and not looking at me right now, you asked the question before, what do we do with older teens, I think you said, and young adults that have maybe anger issues? I don't think we do anything, I'll be honest. Yeah, I was going to come back to you. I don't think we do anything. Think about it. I mean, we're making hard choices right now in terms of, what's the best path forward. And certainly we've identified kids, and I think most people would agree with that. And what is a kid? I mean, we're thinking 12 to 18, give or take a year or two. And we're putting a lot of resources into that because we think you have to. But what about those older and those young adults and into the 20s? I don't think we're doing really anything. And I don't know that we're planning on it either. Maybe we will. Maybe other parts of the system have to help us there. It's a complicated issue. But that age group, I mean, the plan is, just for full transparency, to get them before they get to that point and really try to make a difference as much as we can. I'll close with, nothing is more important to us than public safety. We think it's why we exist. Public safety means an awful lot of different things to different people. But we have to make sure that you're safe and have a safe city and an environment where it would be awfully nice if you didn't notice us at all and you didn't have to worry about the police. Until we get to that perfect place, point two is we got to be there with you. We got to be building relationships with you, keeping the neighborhood safe with you, and being partners. And this is exactly what we need. Business owners, homeowners, parents, and everything else coming out and getting involved. We got to do our end of the bargain to build trust with you so you trust us and you continue to do that. And we got to build some equity in the bank, because I think we've cashed some of those deposits of late, and our bank account's running a little low this year. So thank you for coming out. We look forward to the continued process here. And, you know, she left, but we hear what she said. It's got to be a real process. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lloyd.